Hey, what is up, friends? Hey, good evening, everybody. Today, we are going to talk about Instagram stories. This is part of my Instagram stories series. We are going to use Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Premiere to create awesome transitions for Instagram stories. All right, so before I jump into the computer, let me just briefly explain what's going on. I woke up this morning and I was like, you know what? The show that I'm working on, Timeless, is preempted. It's not on the air tonight, but I have a lot of great fans and I want to give them something fun on my Instagram stories to look at today since they can't watch Timeless. I went back and I found all these photos from the pilot of the show. I went into Photoshop and I created a history of the making of the pilot to be timed out as Instagram stories. And it was cool, but I was like, oh, I'm just gonna be putting a bunch of stills with text on Instagram stories. What can I do to spice this up? And I started thinking, if I was shooting a vlog, every now and then I like to put little transitions in, little blur transition, little filmic transition, maybe just even a simple dissolve, but you can't natively do transitions in Instagram stories from one story panel to the next. So then I was like, well, what's the best way to do that? So I dove into Premiere and I did a little bit of research and I figured it out. And it's really simple and you're gonna love it. I don't wanna waste too much time here. Let's hop right into the computer and show you guys what I did and put it on Instagram, and yeah, let's go. I am in Adobe Photoshop and I am just going to show you guys, going to image size, that I have created a standard document in the size of 1080 by 1920, which is sideways HD. That is the size of Instagram stories. So if you're going to make any templates for Instagram stories in Photoshop, this is the size it should be. I found a bunch of these photos from the show Timeless, from the pilot, and I created an actual story. Each one of these layers is just a different part of my story. That is the tedious creation part. Now this could be anything that you guys make. This could be a story about when your child was born, or your son's first birthday, or it could be an advertisement for your new album. It doesn't matter. The point is, I made a bunch of different pictures and I want to put them on my Instagram stories in some kind of a linear fashion and tell a story. One thing I'd say that is kind of important is to number them so that you can keep track of the order of things. This is kind of optional. I went and I just made this sort of overlay where I added a slight vignette and I added the name Timeless down here. This could be like the title of your slideshow or your sequence. I just wanted something to kind of connect everything. And then I created these left and right arrows. And then on my first image that I save out, I'm only going to have a right arrow. And then on my last image, I'm only going to have the left arrow. So it kind of gives people like a linear left to right fake interface, if you will. Again, completely optional. It's just for looks. You don't need to do any of this stuff. Once I had all my images the way that I like them and ready to go and in the proper aspect ratio for Instagram stories, I saved every single layer out as its own JPEG. I literally just turned the eyeball on for the layer that I wanted, and I went to File, Export, Save for Web, or you can just do Export As, doesn't matter. They both work. I saved it as a JPEG, I hit export, and I created a folder for all of my JPEGs for the story, and I saved them here. Now, I'm not gonna save this one this time because I've already saved everything. It's a little bit tedious, but it's the best way that I found to do it and have a nice, consistent look from shot to shot. So then I went into Adobe Premiere and I imported all of my images. You can literally just drag the folder of images into Premiere, or you can go File, Import. Now, one thing I did is I shift-clicked and selected all the images, and I believe it defaults to 5 seconds in length. And I went in and I went to speed duration and I changed the duration to 15 seconds, and you just hit OK, and then every single JPEG will now drop on the timeline at a default of 15 seconds. The next thing to do is shift click on all of your images, assuming they're in the right order. Since I numbered all of my images from 0 to 23, I know they're in the right order, top to bottom. I just click and drag all of them onto the blank space here, and it will create a timeline with all my images in order. So it's pretty boring to look at. You're just watching at images for 15 seconds at a time, and they're just going to switch from one image to the next image when the time is up. And this is exactly what would happen in Instagram stories. Obviously, if someone was impatient, they could click and go right to the next one, but it's just still images, right? There's a lot of text, there's some interesting stuff here, but in the end, we need to spice this up a little bit. That is where transitions come into play. And if you've ever used Adobe Premiere or any editing program, you know that there are some basic transitions. For example, the cross dissolve. So if I just drag the cross dissolve thing here between these two layers, now all of a sudden I get a nice simple dissolve. It's just a little bit more interesting. Maybe I want to do something else. I could do, let's see, what do we have? We have the iris box. Something simple like that just adds a little bit to my presentation value. This tutorial isn't about what transitions you could use. You could use any transitions you guys want to. You might have your own custom set of transitions that you use. This is going to work with any transition in Adobe Premiere. So that's kind of cool. So you guys get the idea. So I would just go through this entire timeline and I would drop a bunch of transitions on every single transition point. And I'm going to go to my very first image and do some kind of an intro transition. We're just going to take our standard Gaussian blur and apply it to our overall image, but we're going to start at the first frame, add a keyframe, blur it a bunch, repeat edge pixels so you don't get that weird frame, and I'm just going to go in about, let's say 1 second transition. I'm going to unblur it. So that is it. All right guys, so I'm switching over to a timeline that I've now called finished product. So all I did is I dropped cool transitions on in between every single image, and I am ready to get these transitions out of Premiere and into Instagram stories, and this is how we are going to do it. If you look at this first one, I've already done it. I've already chopped it up by adding an edit point before and after the transition. Let me just show you guys how I did that by going to a later transition. So this one I haven't done yet. It's really teeny. I'm going to zoom in. If you hold down the shift key and you drag the timeline marker left to right, it will actually snap to where you want it to snap to. So I am going to click here and I'm going to add an edit on the first and the last markers of this transition. And that is something we're going to have to go through, unfortunately, and do for every single transition. I actually started by adding an edit point right here at the end of my blur. Remember I put that blur at the beginning? So this is the first thing we want to export. We only want to export the transitions as video. We don't need to export the rest of the still because we actually already have still images. So I'm going to hold down shift and go to this edit point, which is why I put the edit points there. It just makes it finding the location really easy. And at the beginning, I'm just going to hit O for out, and that's going to go from the very beginning, which I can set an in point if I want to the out point here, which is this frame. So this is my transition in the very beginning. This is my intro transition. So now I'm just going to export it. So I'm going to go File, Export, Media, and I want to change the name. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to do. I'm going to open this up so I can see the names of all my images, because I'm really terrible at file naming and remembering things. So this is going to just be a visual guide. Watch. So now we go File, Export, Media, and I can drag this over and I can see my names and what's going on. And this is OO Intro. So this is the one that takes place before my OO Intro JPG. So I'm going to save it as OO Intro. I don't like the default settings of the high bitrate. So what I do is I drop down to YouTube 1080. I uncheck audio because I don't have any audio, and I just have to flip these two numbers down here. So I'm going to make it 1080 by 1920. I have saved this as a preset because I do this all the time. So you can go to presets and hit save, give it a name, and I have it, and it's called Instagram Story, and that's it. So I just have to hit the check mark that says Instagram Story, and I just hit export, and it's going to ask me to replace it. Don't worry about that. I hit yes, and it's going to take like no time whatsoever because it's a very short piece of video. As you've imagined, we get to do this for everything. Now we're going to go to our next transition, set an in point and an out point, File, Export, Media. One important thing I forgot to mention before, down here where it says source range, it's really important that it says sequence in and out. That way it's only rendering the in and out points that you've just selected in your sequence. If you have it say like whole sequence or entire sequence or something like that, it's gonna mess up, it's gonna render the whole thing. You do not wanna do that. I'm already on my Instagram Story preset, which is great. I need to give it a different name. This one comes before O1 Lakehurst, so I'm just gonna call this O1 Lakehurst MP4, and I'm gonna hit save. Okay, now let's do the next one. I forgot to put an out point on this one, no big deal, just hit shift, drag here. So it's I and O, by the way, are the shortcut keys. So I is for in point, hold down shift, drag over here. O is for out point, and then File, Export, Media. Now I actually have to change the name, and I haven't done this one yet. So this is O2 Interior Hindenburg. Save. I'm already on Instagram Stories, so all my settings are great. Export. All right, so you guys get the idea. So now I have to do this for the other 22 images. I got a little carried away, I'll admit. I'm gonna pause this, and when it's done, I will get back to you guys and show you my results. All right, so I have finished making all 20 something of these MP4s out of Premiere. Your timeline, by the way, doesn't need to be 24 images. It could be 5, it could be 3, it could be 2. Take a look. Each one of these MP4s is just the transition in between the still images, right? Some pretty cool transitions from one image to the other. and so on and so forth. So now what we have to do is we have to take all of our stills that we created and all of our transitions and get them onto our iPhone or Android phone or whatever we're using to upload to Instagram. The cool thing for me is that I'm actually using OneDrive, and I save this stuff right to my OneDrive, which means that as soon as I have these green check marks, it's already uploaded to the cloud and I can bring it down onto my phone. Guys, so I am back on my phone. So I have now copied the files from my computer to my phone. You could use Dropbox or the cloud or iCloud or whatever you do to get your images from your computer to your phone. Do that for your images and your video, all the stuff we just created in Photoshop and Premiere. Get it from your computer to your phone. Okay, so I am now in Instagram, and I'm assuming you've got your photos and video on your camera roll. I'm gonna hit the stories button, and I'm gonna hit the little icon, and here are all of my images for my Instagram story. Unfortunately, Instagram kind of just throws everything in a jumble, so you're gonna have to double check and stuff. I wish it put it in order. I'm not a huge fan of this Instagram last 24 hours thing. It's got a lot of quirks, but anyway, we gotta use it. It is what it is. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find my intro transition, which I believe is this one here, where we're blurring in, and it's very quick, right? It was only a second long, but that's okay. Let's just add it to our story. And then right away, we're gonna go in and we're gonna go back, and now we're going to add the still image. So this is the still image. This is what we blur into this. So it should match perfectly if we stick this in there. I like to add hashtags to my stuff because it helps grow your followers. If I put a hashtag in here, you're gonna see a little pop. From the blur in, it's gonna pop in. So I wanna kind of put it in an inconspicuous place. So I'm just gonna go hashtag timeless, make it the least offensive color, shrink it down as small as I possibly can. I think it might look better in this one in the top corner. Yeah, you barely can see it in the top corner here. I'm gonna add this to my story, and let's take a look. So already, we blur in and we hold for 15 seconds on this image. That's it, that's great. So we gotta keep going. So let's add our second panel. So we're gonna add this transition. And then we're gonna go and we're gonna find that still image, which looks like it's right here. Again, I'm gonna hashtag timeless, make that small and inconspicuous somewhere in the top corner. Go into here, and it's gonna transition. Nice, look at that, huh? That is really cool. I am going to pause this video for 1 second. I'm gonna add all of my timeline and I'm just gonna walk you guys through it. So let me just pause, let me just stop, and I'll be back in a few. Whew, I just finished putting up this Instagram story. It took a lot longer than I thought, but it worked. Watch this, I'm just gonna go through it right now. Check it out. So here's the start. And as you can see, as I just tapped through this, and you could read the text and spend some time on it, but I'm just gonna go through it quickly. I did a different transition for every single thing. And this is I don't know if I've ever seen an Instagram story quite like this before. One thing I learned, by the way, just a side tip, I put a lot of text up top. Instagram stories likes to take up some of that top space, so don't do that. Next time I do this, I'm gonna bring my text down lower, and I'm probably gonna make my text a little bit bigger. I'm learning too. Look at this, just some cool transitions coming. I really like that transition, that was cool. That was cool. I love this, this looks great. Just keeps going on and on because I made it really long. Oh, that was my favorite. Let me go back and show that one more time. Boom, Eric Kripke, Neil Marshall. So there you go. All right, so that is it. That is how to make cool transitions for your Instagram stories. You can make them as big or as little as you want to. I think it's cool that you can take any transition from Adobe Premiere and translate it to an Instagram story. You just gotta follow my steps. Yeah, so that's it. All right, guys, still making content. I am super duper tired, so I'm gonna go. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.